Congress, after having a month off, I bet you wish you had that, returned to session yesterday after the August recess, and officials are racing against the September 30th budget deadline. Of course they are. To prevent another government shutdown, I'm going to try not to yawn here. Federal spending at its highest point since 1946. That is a problem. With the financial crisis and COVID and a staggering $37 trillion national debt, Congress needs to approve a $1.6 trillion discretionary budget for things like defense and infrastructure. The House is pushing to cut nearly $45 billion, while the Senate is aiming to increase spending. Of course they are. Experts are projecting trillions borrowed annually, driving up interest rates, weakening American purchasing power, making it harder to live the American dream. So where are the Republicans that are supposed to be stopping this? Joining me, Brandon Arnold, Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union in Washington, D.C. Brandon, nice to see you again. I'm sorry, the Senate wants to increase spending? Have they lost their mind?
Yeah, I mean, absolute headline there. The Senate is always trying to spend more money. And unfortunately, because of the filibuster, they're trying to work to a bipartisan consensus here. There isn't much bipartisanship in Washington lately, if you haven't noticed, but there is support across the board in some corners of the U.S. Senate to increase spending. So that is what they're trying to do, utilizing this appropriations process to increase spending at a time when, as you said, the national debt has reached $37 trillion. And for those of you who don't like to deal with massive numbers like that, that is more than $100,000 per man, woman, and child in this country. It is completely out of hand. It is a debt crisis at this point, and the Senate needs to move in the opposite direction, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely has to move in an opposite direction. Where can we cut spending? Because look, it just more and more. How do we get back to 2019 levels of spending? Brandon, that's where we need to be. Pre-COVID spending levels. That's what they promised us. Why is it not happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very frustrating. You look back to 2019, 2020, before COVID struck, the economy was strong. There were plenty of jobs. Inflation wasn't through the roof. And yet we had a much lower level of spending as a percentage of our overall economy. So we can get back to that point. And I think it needs to start small. We did make over $1 trillion of spending cuts in the One Big Beautiful Bill. We need to build on that. There are things like earmarks. It is absolutely astonishing that we are funding $1 million projects for things like oyster and lobster development right now with this big debt that we have on our hands. We are, through the appropriations process, bringing back the Climate Corps, something that Trump zeroed out on one of his first days in office in his second term. Why are we doing this? It's insanity. So we need to start with these smaller things, but we need to build up. Rand Paul, the great senator from Kentucky, has advocated the penny plan, which is trimming just 1 penny across the board. I think that's something that probably most of us have had to do on our household budgets, given the pinch of inflation we felt over the past few years. So if the government can do a similar thing, that would make a huge dent in the red ink that we're facing right now in Washington.
A little thing that would help the red ink could be the interest rates as well. If the Fed brought down the interest rates, would help us some. The fact of the matter is, when there are tax cuts, revenues increase, debts slow down, but good luck telling somebody on the left that. I'll give you the last word, Brandon.
Yeah, I think absolutely growth is part of the equation. We're going to get a lot of growth out of the One Big Beautiful Bill, but it's not enough. Growth is part of the solution. So too is spending restraint. We haven't seen that enough from Washington. Trump has said he wants to move toward a balanced budget. I fully agree with him on that goal. And let's hope we can get there with some hard work in Washington for once.
All right. Brandon Arnold, thank you for being here today, Executive Vice President, National Taxpayers Union. Maybe we can get something figured out. That would be nice. All right. Coming up after the break.